Did you know medieval romances were not just for kings and queens? Were you aware that loyalty could be tested by magic, or that defiance could rewrite destinies? Step back in time to the centuries between 500 AD and 1500 AD, where tales of devotion, sacrifice, and forbidden passion truly came alive. Number 10. Culhwch and Olwen. Deep within the misty valleys and rolling hills of ancient Wales, a story of profound yearning and impossible tasks began to unfurl, passed from the lips of bards to eager ears around crackling hearths. This was the tale of Culhwch, a young prince cursed by his own stepmother to love only one woman, Olwen, the daughter of Ysbaddaden ben Cawr, a giant whose beard swept the ground and whose eyelids needed attendants to lift. Curse was stark and unyielding. Culhwch would pine for Olwen, and no other, until he found her. Her beauty was said to be so radiant that 4 white trefoils sprang up wherever she stepped, marking her path with blossoms. The very thought of her filled Culhwch with an overwhelming longing. He grew thin, his spirit consumed by this singular, impossible desire. His father, King Culhwch, saw his son's torment and suggested he seek the help of his cousin Arthur. Not just any Arthur, but the legendary King Arthur, whose court at Culhwch was a beacon of chivalry and power. Culhwch, clad in rich silks, and astride a horse that moved like the wind, arrived at Arthur's court. His request was bold, almost arrogant, for he asked that Arthur grant him any boon he wished by the might of his warriors. Arthur, taken by the youth's earnestness and his noble lineage, agreed. Culhwch then revealed his heart's affliction. He sought Olwen. Arthur, though a mighty king, knew of Ysbaddaden ben Cawr, a formidable and cruel giant, notorious for slaying all of his daughter's suitors. The giant had a terrible prophecy. He would die on the day his daughter married. This made him intensely protective and savagely violent towards any who dared approach Olwen. Despite the known dangers, Arthur, bound by his word, assembled a host of his most renowned knights to aid Culhwch. Among them were Shay, the strongest of Arthur's men, Bedwyr, the one-handed, and Gwalchmai, a master of courtesy in battle. They were a diverse company, each with their own unique talents and powers, ready to face any challenge for the sake of the young prince's love. The journey to Ysbaddaden's fortress was long and filled with peril. They faced monstrous creatures, navigated treacherous landscapes, and encountered strange, ancient beings. Yet their resolve remained firm, driven by the knowledge of Culhwch's deep love and Arthur's honor. When they finally reached the giant's formidable dwelling, they found Ysbaddaden to be as monstrous as the rumors suggested. His first reaction to their request for Olwen's hand was to hurl venomous spears at them, testing their mettle. The knights, however, deftly caught or deflected, each one proving their worth. Ysbaddaden, seeing that these were no ordinary suitors, then subjected Culhwch to a litany of impossible tasks. These tasks were not mere chores, they were epic challenges designed to be insurmountable, ensuring Olwen would never be taken from him. There were nearly 40 tasks in total, each more daunting than the last, and all of them necessary to prepare for the giant's wedding feast. They ranged from clearing vast tracts of land, not with plows but with a single seed planted by a mythical ox, to finding ancient magical tools. One task demanded the retrieval of the comb and shears from the head of Torch Truth, a monstrous wild boar, once a king, now a savage beast that roamed the land with its brood. Another required the sharpening of the boar's tusks, a feat that would necessitate taming the beast first. The most famous of these tasks, and the one that required the most extensive collaboration, involved acquiring the blood of the Black Witch for a magical potion, or retrieving the sword of Gurhir, Gwalstad Aethoed, who could speak to all animals. Each task was a story in itself, a testament to the immense power of Arthur's court and the lengths to which they would go for their kin. Arthur's knights, led by the steadfast Culhwch, embarked on these quests, facing down giants, sorcerers, and mythical beasts. They enlisted the aid of other legendary figures, demonstrating the interconnectedness of the medieval Welsh heroic cycle. For example, to get the comb and shears from Torch Trith, Arthur led a massive hunt across Wales and into Ireland, a pursuit so grand it became a legend in its own right, highlighting the sheer scale of the endeavor. Through cunning, immense bravery, and sometimes sheer brute force, the knight systematically completed each task. Culhwch, though often reliant on the might and wisdom of Arthur and his champions, never wavered in his devotion to Olwen. He endured hardship, witnessed great battles, and saw his kinsmen risk their lives for his happiness. Tasks, seemingly random, all served a purpose in the grand ancient scheme, preparing the world for the coming of Olwen and the giant's demise. Finally, with all the tasks completed, the time came for the wedding. Wise Badadon, seeing that his fate was sealed, could not deny his daughter's hand. He was subjected to a barbering, a symbolic act of his dwindling power, and in the process several of his organs were taken, fulfilling ancient prophecies about his weakening. Culhwch, now fully worthy, claimed Olwen. The giant in the end was overcome by the sheer will of the hero and the might of Arthur's court. According to the old tales, Wise Badadon finally met his end, completing the prophecy and paving the way for Olwen's marriage. Culhwch and Olwen were wed, and she, whose steps brought forth trefoils, became his queen. This tale, a cornerstone of Welsh mythology, was a popular example of a heroic quest for love, often recited to illustrate the boundless determination required to achieve a fated union. The sheer impossibility of the tasks underscored the power of true love and the unwavering support of a powerful king. Number 9. Erec and Enide. From the grand courts of 12th century France, a story emerged, woven from the threads of Breton lays and knightly valor, telling of a love that deepened through trial and error. It was the tale of Erec, a knight of King Arthur's Round Table, and Enide, a maiden of breathtaking beauty and simple grace. This story, famously put to paper by Chrétien de Troyes, often began its journey in the sung verses of traveling performers and storytellers before it became a written masterpiece. Erec, young and celebrated, was known for his courage and prowess in battle. One spring morning, while out hunting with Queen Guinevere, he stumbled upon a scene that would change his life. A dwarf serving a haughty knight and his lady insulted the queen's maiden. Erec, ever the defender of honor, challenged the rude knight to a joust, but to do so, he needed a shield, armor, and a horse. He found these in the modest home of a poor but noble vavasor who had a daughter named Enide. Her beauty was astonishing even in her faded dress. Her golden hair, her clear eyes, her serene countenance captivated Erec. He was struck not just by her appearance but by her gentle nature. He knew almost instantly that he would marry her. Erec, borrowing the vavasor's equipment, rode with Enide to the joust, triumphed, proving his skill, and then returned to Arthur's court with Enide. The entire court was charmed by her, and King Arthur himself gave her rich clothes and blessed their union. Their wedding was a grand affair, a spectacle of joy and celebration. Erec and Enide were deeply in love, their days filled with happiness and devotion. Erec, so consumed by his love for Enide, began to neglect his knightly duties. He spent his days in luxurious idleness, preferring Enide's company to the calls of adventure or the clang of swords. He became known as a recreant knight, a warrior who had lost his edge. Whispers began to spread throughout the court, murmurs of his inaction and Enide's supposed role in it. One morning, Enide, overhearing some of these hushed criticisms, wept quietly in her sleep, lamenting Erec's lost renown and her perceived fault. In it, Erec, waking, heard her sobs and misunderstood their cause. He thought she was lamenting him, that she was unhappy with their life. His pride wounded his heart, Heavy with misunderstanding, he decided they must embark on a journey of trials to prove his worth and test her loyalty. Commanded her to ride before him, never to speak to him unless spoken to, no matter what danger they encountered. Enide, heartbroken but obedient, agreed, and so their journey began. They rode through forests, across plains, and into wild, untamed lands. Time and again they encountered perilous situations. Robbers attacked them, fierce knights challenged Erec, and cunning sorcerers tried to ensnare them each time Enide saw the danger approaching. She would warn Erec, even though it meant disobeying his strict command. She would cry out, "Lord, you must arm yourself," or, "Lord, look behind you." Each time, Erec, frustrated by her disobedience, would chide her, but he would also act on her warning, defeating the threat. These repeated incidents were a test both of Enide's obedience and her love. Despite Erec's harsh words, she remained steadfast, her loyalty unwavering. She saw his brilliance in combat, his courage, and her love for him deepened with each passing challenge. Erec, too, began to see her devotion. He realized that her warnings were not defiance, but an outpouring of her concern for his safety, a clear sign of her profound love. He saw her bravery, her quiet suffering, and her unwavering presence by his side. One famous incident involved the joie de la cour, the joy of the court. Erec had to defeat a formidable knight who had trapped himself and his lady in an enchanted garden. Erec, fighting with renewed vigor, broke the enchantment, freeing the knight and bringing joy back to the land. This final epic challenge was a turning point. It signified Erec's complete return to his knightly prowess, his honor fully restored. By the end of their long and arduous journey, Erec had proved his worth, not just to the world, but to himself. More importantly, he understood Enide's true heart. He realized that her love was not a hindrance, but a profound strength. Their misunderstandings melted away, replaced by a deeper, more mature understanding and affection. Their reunion at King Arthur's court was celebrated with great pomp. Erec and Enide, having passed through the crucible of trials, returned as a stronger, more united couple. Erec went on to inherit his father's kingdom, ruling justly with Enide by his side. Their love, now a symbol of unwavering devotion and the Dajan power of shared experience. Their story, recounted by traveling bards, served as a moral lesson for knights and ladies, showing that true love endures tests and emerges stronger. Number 8. Troilus and Cresade. The echoes of a city under siege, the clash of bronze on shield, and the bittersweet pangs of a love doomed by fate, resonated throughout the medieval world. In the tale of Troilus and Cresade, while Geoffrey Chaucer gave this story its definitive English form, the tragic romance had been circulating in various versions across Europe for centuries, stemming from ancient Greek and Roman accounts of the Trojan War filtered through medieval adaptation. It was a story told and retold, sung and lamented long before it was committed to the written page. Troilus, a prince of Troy, was a valiant warrior, one of the bravest sons of King Priam. Yet, for all his martial prowess, he had long mocked love and its follies, seeing it as a weakness. But fate, as it often does, had a different plan for him. One day, during a festival in honor of the goddess Pallas, Troilus saw Cresade. She was a young widow known for her extraordinary beauty and gentle grace, the daughter of Culhwch, a Trojan priest who had famously defected to the Greek side, predicting Troy's fall. The moment Troilus saw her, his heart was ensnared. He fell deeply and helplessly in love. Consumed by a passion he had once scorned, his love was secret, agonizingly so. He, the mighty warrior, became a shy and tormented lover, suffering in silence. Turned to Pandarus, Cresade's uncle and a close friend, for help. Pandarus, a witty and worldly man, took on the role of a go-between, a masterful manipulator and confidant. He saw Troilus's torment, and with cunning words and carefully crafted schemes, began to advocate for his friend's love to Creside. Pandora painted a picture of Troilus' noble character, his valor, and his deep affection. Creside, initially hesitant, cautious due to her vulnerable position as a widow and her father's betrayal, gradually began to yield to Pandarus's persuasion and to Troilus' earnest, silent devotion. Their love blossomed in secrecy amidst the chaos of the besieged city. Their meetings were discreet, their vows whispered under the cover of night. Their love was pure and intense, a fleeting sanctuary from the constant threat of war. Chaucer describes their joy with vivid detail, portraying them as deeply devoted to each other, their passion blossoming with a beautiful tenderness. They spent blissful nights together, sharing intimate moments and promises of eternal fidelity. Troilus adored Creside, believing her to be the embodiment of perfect love and loyalty. Creside, for her part, reciprocated his love with genuine affection, vowing never to leave him. However, the relentless siege of Troy cast a long shadow over their happiness. A turning point arrived when the Greeks, eager to end the war, proposed a prisoner exchange. Culhwch, Creside's father, who was with the Greeks, demanded his daughter back in exchange for a captured Trojan warrior, Antenor. The Trojan council, swayed by Culhwch's pleas and the strategic importance of the exchange, agreed. The news shattered Troilus and Creside. Their world crumbled. They met in anguish, their tears flowing freely. Troilus pleaded with her to stay, to defy the decree, perhaps to escape with him. But Creside, ever pragmatic and fearing for her safety, reasoned that defying the council would only bring greater danger upon them. She promised him that she would find a way to return to him within 10 days. She swore on her honor, on her very soul, that she would be true. Troilus, heartbroken but clinging to her promise, let her go, watching as she was escorted out of the city gates, leaving him to face a world devoid of her presence. Once among the Greeks, Creside was received warmly by Diomedes, a bold and charming Greek warrior. He began to woo her relentlessly, using his persuasive words and powerful presence. Creside separated from Troilus, facing an uncertain future in the enemy camp, and perhaps swayed by her uncle's urging to make the best of her new situation, gradually began to waver. The weight of circumstance, the fear of isolation, and the relentless pursuit by Diomedes slowly chipped away at her resolve. She postponed her return, sending letters to Troilus that grew increasingly distant, offering excuses and vague hopes. Troilus meanwhile waited with agonizing patience, his hopes slowly turning to despair. He rode out to the city walls every day, straining his eyes for a glimpse of her returning. He sent messages filled with his undying love and longing. But Creside did not return. When he finally saw a brooch, a gift he had given her adorning Diomedes' armor, the terrible truth crashed upon him. Creside had betrayed him. His world, his love, his very reason for living. Devastated and enraged, Troilus sought Diomedes in battle, fighting with a reckless fury born of heartbreak. He became an even fiercer warrior, but his spirit was broken. Eventually, as the war raged on, he met his end at the hands of the mighty Achilles. Creside, now fully with Diomedes, became a symbol of feminine inconstancy in medieval literature, while Troilus remained the epitome of faithful, suffering love. This tragic story, told and retold, served as a powerful cautionary tale about the fleeting nature of happiness amidst chaos and the painful reality of betrayal. Even when love feels absolute, it resonated for centuries because it spoke to universal themes of love, loss, and the cruel hand of fate. Number 7, Sir Orfeo. From the rolling hills of Britain, a lyrical tale of devotion and daring, often sung by harpists and minnesingers, traveled across the medieval landscape. This was the story of Sir Orfeo, a king of Thrace, a land that some believed to be Winchester in England, and his beloved queen, Eurydice. This Middle English romance, rooted in the ancient Greek myth of Orpheus and Eurydice, was reimagined for a medieval audience, transforming the classical hero into a chivalrous king and a devoted husband. Sir Orfeo was a king of immense renown, not only for his noble character and just rule, but also for his extraordinary skill with the harp. His music was so enchanting that it could charm all living creatures. Still the wind and even make stones weep. His melodies were legendary, bringing joy and solace wherever they were heard. His queen Eurydice was celebrated for her beauty, her kindness, and her deep love for her husband. Their marriage was a picture of perfect harmony, their kingdom prosperous, their lives seemingly blessed. One bright spring morning, as Queen Eurydice rested beneath a flowering almond tree in her orchard, a strange and terrible event occurred. She fell asleep, and when she awoke, she was screaming, tearing at her clothes, distraught beyond measure. Her ladies-in-waiting rushed to her side, but she was inconsolable, filled with a terrifying vision. She recounted a dream. She had been visited by a company of glorious knights, led by a king in a golden crown, riding magnificent white steeds. This king, a being from the other world, the realm of the fairies, had commanded her to come with him. He told her she was to be his queen. Eurydice, terrified, resisted, but he warned her that if she did not come willingly, she would be torn limb from limb. Sir Orfeo, upon hearing her tale, was heartbroken. He tried to comfort her, but he knew the power of the other world, the realm of the Fae, with its capricious and often cruel inhabitants. He knew these beings did not make idle threats. He gathered his strongest knights and positioned them around the orchard, hoping to protect Eurydice from the unseen forces, but it was in vain. As they stood guard, Eurydice simply vanished from their midst, spirited away by the fairy king and his host. The kingdom plunged into mourning. Sir Orfeo, utterly devastated by the loss of his beloved queen, could not bear to rule. He abdicated his throne, distributed his possessions to his stewards, and taking nothing but his beloved harp, wandered into the wilderness. For 10 long years he lived a solitary, harsh life in the wild woods. His royal robes became rags, his skin weathered by the elements, his hair long and matted. He survived on roots and berries, sheltered in caves, and hunted with his bow. His only comfort was his harp. Every day he would play, pouring his grief and longing into his music. The animals of the forest would gather around him, charmed by his melodies, and the trees would bend to listen. His music was no longer just joyful. It was now imbued with a profound sorrow, a lament for his lost love. One day, while wandering through the desolate landscape, he saw them, a procession of otherworldly hunters, their hounds silent, their steeds gleaming white. Then a greater sight. 100 knights and ladies, adorned in white, riding silently through the forest, and among them he saw her Eurydice. She looked beautiful, though pale and ethereal, and she was surrounded by a retinue of fairy folk. Orfeo, overjoyed and desperate, followed them unseen. They led him to a hidden, shimmering portal that opened into the other world, a magnificent jewel-encrusted castle, unlike anything seen in the mortal realm. He disguised himself as a humble minstrel, his harp, his only credential, and entered the castle gates. The guards, recognizing his musical talent, allowed him entry. He played his harp before the fairy king and queen, his music more enchanting than ever, imbued with the suffering and longing of a decade. The fairy king, captivated by the beautiful melodies, offered him any gift he desired. Orfeo, with immense courage, asked for the lady Eurydice. The fairy king, surprised and hesitant, initially resisted, claiming it was improper to give away a lady who had been chosen as his queen. But Orfeo reminded him of his promise, and argued that a king's word must be kept. Bound by his oath and the magic of Orfeo's music, the fairy king reluctantly agreed. Eurydice, still in her ethereal state, was reunited with her husband. They returned through the hidden portal back to the mortal world, to the very spot where she had been taken. Orfeo, still disguised, decided to test his loyal steward. He sent Eurydice ahead to the city, concealing her identity, and went himself, still in rags, to his former court. He told his steward a fabricated story of seeing the former king's harp. The steward, recognizing the harp, wept, believing Orfeo to be dead. Orfoa then revealed his true identity, and the steward, overjoyed, recognized his king. The kingdom rejoiced at the return of their beloved king and queen. Orfoa and Herodes were crowned once more, and their reign was marked by justice and peace. This tale, a testament to unwavering love and the power of music to overcome even the supernatural, was a cherished romance, passed down to remind listeners that true devotion could conquer even the realm of the fae. Number 6. Lay of Yonec. Among the 12 lays of Marie de France, sung by Jean-Glove Norman, England, is a story of forbidden love. England is a story of forbidden love, magical tranquil, and a lingering sense of justice, told through the mystical and often tragic lens. The Lay of Yonec is a poignant exploration of devotion against tyrannical odds. In the kingdom of Brittany, there lived a very old, very rich, and very jealous lord. He had married a young, beautiful, and noble lady who quickly found herself trapped in a gilded cage. The lord, consumed by suspicion, kept her locked away in a high tower with no one for company but her old, grumbling sister-in-law, who acted as a constant guard. She was allowed no visitors, no contact with the outside world save for her husband, who visited only to assert his dominance. She was a bird in a cage, longing for freedom and true affection, and her heart grew heavy with sorrow. She grieved, not for want of worldly goods, but for the simple joy of companionship, for a love that was absent from her life. One day, as she sat weeping in her chamber, lamenting her lonely fate, a marvelous and unexpected event occurred. A magnificent hawk, larger and more splendid than any she had ever seen, flew in through her window. It transformed before her eyes into a handsome and noble knight. He was courteous, charming, and seemed to understand her unspoken longing. He revealed that he had loved her from afar for a long time, drawn by her virtue and her plight. He promised her his devotion, but only if she could genuinely return his affection, not just for the sake of escape, but out of true love. He explained that he could only appear to her if she desired him with pure intent. The lady, astonished but deeply moved, recognized his sincerity. Her heart, long starved of affection, opened to him. She confessed her love, and so began their secret, passionate affair. The knight, whose name was unknown to her, would visit her regularly, always transforming from a hawk, bringing her joy and solace she had never known. He was a perfect lover, kind, considerate, and utterly devoted. He brought her news of the world, comforting her loneliness, and she in turn found profound happiness in his presence. Their love, born out of a desire for connection and understanding, flourished in the confines of the tower. Their secret, however, could not last forever. The jealous husband, noticing his wife's renewed happiness and improved demeanor, grew suspicious. He questioned his sister, the old woman who guarded the lady. He forced her to reveal the truth, threatening her with severe punishment if she withheld information. The sister, terrified, confessed to seeing the knight entering the lady's chamber. Enraged, the lord devised a cruel trap. He ordered his men to plant sharp iron spikes on the windowsill hidden from view, intending to impale the knight when he next flew in. The next time the knight visited, unaware of the danger, he transformed and flew into the window. The hidden spikes pierced him deeply, wounding him mortally. He still managed to transform and appear before his beloved, but he was bleeding profusely, his strength failing. He revealed to her his true identity. He was king of the fairy realm. He told her that he was dying, but before he left, he prophesied. Told her that she was pregnant with his child, a son who would be named Yonec. He foretold that their son would avenge his death. He also gave her a ring, which while she wore it would make her husband forget their affair. He then transformed back into a hawk and flew away, bleeding a trail across the sky, leaving the lady heartbroken and devastated. Years passed. The lady gave birth to her son Yonec, who grew to be a strong and handsome young man resembling his true father. Her husband, under the influence of the magical ring, remained oblivious to the truth. One day, the lady, her husband, and Yonec, now a squire, were traveling through a dense forest. They came upon a magnificent abbey where a grand tomb was being consecrated. The lady, drawn by an inexplicable feeling, entered the abbey. Inside, she saw 2 coffins. As the ceremony unfolded, the priest revealed that the first tomb contained the body of a king who had been mortally wounded by a jealous man while visiting his beloved. The second tomb contained a sword belonging to that same king. Upon hearing these words, the lady knew she recognized a story as her own tragic past. Overwhelmed by grief and the bitter memory of her lost love, she cried out, revealing the truth of the affair and the identity of Yonec's true father. She explained how her husband had murdered her lover, and how Yonec was the son of a king from another realm. After confessing, she collapsed onto the tomb, and her heart gave out. She died, her suffering finally at an end. Yonec, realizing the truth of his parentage and the injustice of his mother's life, took up the sword from the second tomb. Fooled by vengeance and the long-suppressed pain of his mother, he confronted his stepfather, his mother's tyrannical husband. With a single decisive blow, Yonec struck down the old lord, avenging his true father and liberating his mother's memory. The people, understanding the justice of the act, made Yonec their new king. The story of Yonec, often recited with a somber tone, was a powerful and often unsettling tale conveying themes of fate, forbidden love, and a long arm of poetic justice. It highlighted the dangers of jealousy and the enduring power of the love that transcends mortal boundaries. Number 5. Aucassin and Nicolette. A singular and charming medieval romance, the chantifable of Aucassin and Nicolette, sung and recited by wandering entertainers, offered a blend of prose and verse, a perfect form for oral tradition. It tells a delightful story of defiant love between a noble knight and a Saracen slave girl, challenging the rigid social conventions of its time with wit and tenderness. Aucassin was the young, handsome, and rather obstinate son of Count Garin de Beaucaire. His father was embroiled in a bitter war with a neighboring lord, Count Bougard de Valence. Aucassin, however, had no interest in the war or in his father's dynastic plans. His heart was utterly consumed by love for Nicolette. Nicolette was a Saracen girl, a captive bought by the Count Seneschal who had raised her. She was beautiful, intelligent, and pure of heart, but her slave status and foreign origin made her an unsuitable match for a noble of Aucassin's. Standing, Count Garin was furious with his son's infatuation. He tried everything to separate them, fearing that Aucassin would disgrace their noble line by marrying a slave. He offered Aucassin a marriage to a wealthy and well-born princess, but Aucassin stubbornly refused. He declared that he would never marry anyone but Nicolette, and that if he could not have her, he would take no part in his father's war, letting their family's lands be ravaged. "If you do not let me have Nicolette," Aucassin famously declared, "I will not fight your battles, nor ride your charger, nor wear your armor. I will die before I yield." Count Garin, desperate for his son's help in the ongoing war, finally agreed to a compromise. He imprisoned Nicolette in a tower, hoping to break Aucassin's resolve. Aucassin was distraught, refusing to eat or drink. His father then told him that if he would fight in the upcoming battle and truly distinguish himself, Nicolette, Aucassin, spurred by the hope of seeing his beloved, rushed into battle. He fought with astonishing ferocity, captured Count Bougard de Valence himself, and brought him back to his father. But when Aucassin demanded his reward, Count Garin, fearing the consequences of allowing such a scandalous match, broke his promise and refused to release Nicolette. Aucassin, feeling betrayed, released Bougard de Valence, much to his father's fury, and was himself thrown into prison. While Aucassin languished in his cell, Nicolette, with cleverness and determination, managed to escape her tower. She fashioned a rope from her bed linens, and with a daring leap descended to the castle moat. She wandered through the dark night, eventually finding refuge in the forest. Building a small hut for herself, she heard that Aucassin was in prison, and disguising herself as a minstrel approached the castle walls. She sang a mournful song of their love, hoping to reach Aucassin. He heard her, and his heart leaped with hope. Through secret messages passed by sympathetic guards, they managed to arrange a meeting. Nicolette, disguised as a shepherd boy, met Aucassin in the forest. Their reunion was filled with joy and desperate plans. They decided to flee together. They escaped into the wilderness, living off the land, finding solace in each other's company. Their journey was not without peril. They encountered dangers, faced hunger, and had to evade capture. Yet their love sustained them. Their wanderings eventually led them to the sea. They found a ship and through a series of fortunate events embarked on a voyage. However, a storm separated them, and Nicolette was captured by Saracen pirates, while Aucassin, in another ship, was taken by a different group of Saracens. Nicolette, still resourceful and cunning, found herself in the city of Carthage, which was her true homeland. She discovered that she was not a slave, but the daughter of the king of Carthage. She revealed her identity and was welcomed back into her royal family. But her heart still longed for Aucassin. She devised a plan. She disguised herself once more, this time as a jongleur, and journeyed back to Beaucaire, the home of Aucassin. Meanwhile, Aucassin had also found his way back to Beaucaire. His parents had passed away, and he had inherited the countship. But he was miserable without Nicolette, believing her lost forever. As he sat on his throne, a jongleur arrived at the court, singing a sad and beautiful song of a noble knight and a Saracen girl who loved each other deeply, only to be separated by cruel fate. Aucassin immediately recognized the story. The jongleur, who was Nicolette in disguise, then revealed herself to him. Their reunion was ecstatic. All obstacles had been overcome. Their love, which had defied parents' social status, war, and separation, finally found its deserved happiness. Aucassin and Nicolette were married with great celebration, and they ruled Beaucaire together, a testament to a love that was stronger than societal expectations and the whims of fortune. Their story, a beacon of romantic perseverance, was a favored recitation for its charming blend of adventure, tenderness, and rebellious spirit. Number 4. Floris and Blanchefleur. This tale, a widely popular romance in medieval Europe, was translated and adapted into numerous languages, indicating its strong presence in oral and popular storytelling traditions. The story of Floris and Blanchefleur, a love as pure as it was tested, crossed cultural and religious boundaries, resonating with audiences who cherish tales of unwavering devotion. In the kingdom of Sicily, during a pilgrimage to St. James of Compostela, a Saracen king named Felice and his queen discovered a Christian merchant and his pregnant wife, who had fallen ill and died. The compassionate queen took pity on the orphan girl born shortly after taking her in and raising her alongside her own son, Floris. They were born on the same day, a bond that seemed to mark their fate. The queen named the Christian girl Blanchefleur, meaning white flower, for her purity and beauty, and treated her as her own daughter. Floris and Blanchefleur grew up together in the royal palace. They were inseparable, attending lessons together, playing in the palace gardens, sharing every secret. As they entered adolescence, their childhood affection deepened into a profound and passionate love. Floris, a handsome and chivalrous prince, adored Blanchefleur, and she, a maiden of exquisite beauty and gentle spirit, returned his love with equal fervor. Their bond was pure and strong, a love that transcended their different upbringings and religious backgrounds. However, their happiness was shattered when King Felice discovered their secret romance. He was enraged. How could his royal son, the future king, stoop to marry a Christian orphan, a former slave? It was an unthinkable disgrace to his lineage and his kingdom. He swiftly decided to separate them, sending Floris away to school in another city, hoping the distance would break their bond. While Floris was away, the king devised a cruel plan to get rid of Blanchefleur permanently. He decided to sell her into slavery. He built a magnificent tomb, claiming it was for his son, Floris, who had supposedly died. He then gathered his people and announced that Floris had died, and Blanchefleur, in her grief, had taken her own life, falling onto Floris's tomb. He sold Blanchefleur to merchants for a hefty sum of gold, a silver cup that held the exact measure of her weight, and sent her away believing he had resolved the problem. Floris, upon returning, rushed to the tomb, heartbroken by the news of Blanchefleur's supposed death. He was inconsolable, ready to end his own life upon her tomb. Only then did the queen, moved by her son's profound grief and love, confess the truth. Blanchefleur was alive, sold to merchants, and likely taken to a far-off land. Filled with renewed hope and a burning determination, Floris resolved to find his beloved, packed his belongings, including a magical ring that would change color if he or his beloved were in danger, and set off on his quest. His journey was long and perilous, taking him across many lands and through numerous adventures. He disguised himself as a merchant, his true identity, a secret asking travelers and innkeepers about a beautiful maiden named Blanchefleur. His search eventually led him to Babylon, to the court of the Emir, a powerful ruler who had a magnificent harem, a towering structure called the Tower of Maidens. Rumor had it that Blanchefleur, bought for an exorbitant price, was now a treasured member of this harem, kept safe and secluded. Floris knew he could not simply enter. He devised a clever plan. He befriended the gatekeeper of the Emir's garden, bribing him with lavish gifts and engaging him in games of chess, allowing him to win often over time. He gained the gatekeeper's trust. Through this gatekeeper, Floris learned about the layout of the Tower of Maidens. The gatekeeper described the routine of the maidens and the structure of their chambers. Floris, with the gatekeeper's assistance, managed to sneak into the tower hidden within a basket of flowers delivered to the maidens. Once inside, he navigated the complex corridors until he found the chamber where Blanchefleur resided. There was a problem. Blanchefleur shared her chamber with another maiden named Clarisse. Floris, overwhelmed with emotion, mistakenly kissed Clarisse in the darkness. Clarisse, startled, cried out, but when Floris explained his desperate situation and his true love for Blanchefleur, Clarisse, touched by his devotion, promised to help. She showed him to Blanchefleur's bed. Their reunion was joyous and tearful, their love reaffirmed after their long separation. They spent several blissful days together, hidden within the tower. However, one day the Emir, during his routine visit to the harem, discovered Floris hiding in Blanchefleur's bed. Enraged by this affront to his honor and his possession, he ordered their execution. They were brought before the Emir's court, facing certain death. But something remarkable happened. As they stood condemned, their love shone forth so purely that it moved the hearts of the Emir's noblemen, and even the Emir himself. Floris confessed his identity as a prince and his unwavering love for Blanchefleur, recounting their story. He begged for their lives, offering himself for execution if Blanchefleur could be spared. Blanchefleur, in turn, offered herself for execution if Floris could be spared. Their mutual self-sacrifice, their unshakable devotion melted the Emir's wrath. Instead of death, the Emir, deeply impressed, decided to spare them. He not only forgave them, but, recognizing the purity of their love, arranged for their marriage. He even suggested that Floris take Clarisse as a second wife. But Floris gently refused, stating his heart belonged only to Blanchefleur. They were married in a grand ceremony, and soon after, news arrived that Floris's parents had died, making him king of Sicily. Floris and Blanchefleur returned to Sicily, where they ruled justly and peacefully, their love a legend. Floris even converted to Christianity, embracing Blanchefleur's faith, solidifying their union, not just in love, but in spirit. This story, recited and copied, became a beloved narrative of overcoming obstacles. For love, with its strong themes of perseverance and true devotion. Number 3. Heloise and Abelard. This is a love story that truly unfolded in the medieval period, not as fiction but as a passionate, tragic reality, known through their eloquent and deeply personal letters. and spread through the accounts of those who knew them. The tale of Heloise and Peter Abelard, a brilliant scholar and his gifted student, became a whispered legend throughout the 12th century intellectual centers of France, a testament to forbidden love and profound intellectual connection. Peter Abelard was one of the most brilliant and controversial philosophers and theologians of his age, a master of dialectic whose lectures in Paris drew students from all over Europe. He was Minoc, renowned for his intellect and perhaps for his arrogance. Among his students was Heloise, a young woman of exceptional intelligence, remarkable beauty, and profound learning, fluent in Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, a rarity for her time. She was the niece of Fulbert, a canon at Notre Dame Cathedral, who entrusted her education to Abelard. Abelard, ostensibly her tutor, was struck by Heloise's intellect and beauty. Their lessons, meant to be intellectual exercises, quickly turned into something more intimate. Despite his position as a cleric and her as his student, a passionate and illicit affair blossomed between them. Abelard, in his own writings, later confessed to being consumed by his desire for her, neglecting his studies and duties. Heloise, for her part, was utterly devoted to him, captivated by his brilliance and charisma. Their love was fierce and consuming, a secret passion unfolding within the confines of intellectual pursuit. Their affair, however, could not remain hidden indefinitely. Heloise became pregnant. This scandalous news, a grave breach of social and clerical norms, brought shame and fury upon Canon Fulbert. To protect Heloise and their unborn child from public condemnation, Abelard secretly took Heloise away to his home province of Brittany, where she gave birth to a son, Astrolabe. Abelard, seeking to placate Fulbert and legitimize their relationship in some way, proposed a secret marriage. Heloise remarkably resisted this proposal. She argued against marriage for him, believing it would ruin his brilliant ecclesiastical career, his path to high office and intellectual freedom. She declared that his intellectual pursuits and his philosophical renown were far more important than a traditional marriage, and that she would rather be his mistress than his wife, if it meant preserving his scholarly future. She even proposed that she should enter a convent so that he could pursue his career unhindered. This astonishing, selfless devotion underscored the depth of her love and her intellectual understanding of his calling. Despite her fervent objections and likely swayed by his own sense of honor and responsibility, Abelard insisted on the secret marriage. They were wed secretly, hoping to appease Fulbert. However, Fulbert, still consumed by shame and a burning desire for vengeance, believed Abelard had tricked him and that the marriage was insufficient reparation for the public dishonor. In a terrible act of retribution, Fulbert's servants attacked Abelard in his sleep, brutally castrating him. This horrific event irrevocably altered their lives. Abelard, his career and his physical person shattered, entered a monastery, becoming a monk. Heloise, following his wishes and out of a profound sense of devotion and penitence, took the veil and became a nun at the convent of Argenteuil, leaving their young son to be raised by others. Their physical separation was complete, their worldly love seemingly ended. Yet their story did not end there. Years later, a series of letters began to pass between them. These letters, discovered centuries later, reveal the enduring depth of their love and the extraordinary intellectual and spiritual connection that bound them. Abelard, now an abbot, wrote first in a letter that recounted his misfortunes, a letter that Heloise somehow received. Heloise's replies were passionate, eloquent, and deeply personal. She confessed her enduring love for him, her constant torment, the pain of their separation, and her struggles with her vows, as her heart still belonged to him, even in the cloister. Her letters are remarkable for their raw emotion, her intellectual prowess, and her unwavering devotion. She questioned her faith, her forced celibacy, and grappled with the memory of their shared passion. Abelard, in turn, offered guidance and comfort, urging her to find solace in God, but also revealing his own sorrow and regret. Their correspondence explored themes of love, sin, suffering, redemption, and the nature of their past relationship. Heloise eventually became the abbess of the Paraclete, a monastery founded by Abelard. She rebuilt the institution, turning it into a thriving center of learning and spiritual life. When Abelard died, his body was brought to the Paraclete, where he was buried. Many years later, Heloise was buried beside him. Their remains eventually moved to Père Lachaise Cemetery in Paris. Rest together. Their story, preserved in their searingly honest letters, became a powerful and often controversial legend, speaking to the enduring nature of love, the conflict between earthly passion and spiritual devotion, and the profound impact of intellectual connection. It was a tale that shocked and fascinated, recited and discussed, a true romance in the heart of the medieval world. Number 2. Lancelot and Guinevere. Among the most tragic and infamous love stories of the Arthurian legend, the affair of Sir Lancelot and Queen Guinevere, a narrative often told in hushed tones and sorrowful songs by bards across Europe, became a cornerstone of courtly romance and chivalric tragedy. This tale, popularized in the French Arthurian romances and later in Sir Thomas Malory's Le Morte Arthur, was initially spread through oral traditions, evolving with each retelling. Sir Lancelot du Lac, considered the greatest knight of King Arthur's Round Table, was renowned for his unparalleled skill in battle, his immense strength, his noble bearing, and his impeccable courtesy. He was the epitome of chivalry, often undertaking quests and defending the innocent. His fame was second only to King Arthur himself. King Arthur, a just and honorable king, had chosen Guinevere, a queen of great beauty and dignity, to be his wife. Their marriage was meant to symbolize the unity and glory of Camelot. However, Lancelot, after arriving at Arthur's court and becoming his most trusted champion, found himself irresistibly drawn to Queen Guinevere. It was a love that was forbidden from its very inception, a love that would ultimately unravel the very fabric of Arthur's noble kingdom. Guinevere, for her part, was equally captivated by Lancelot's prowess, his devotion, and his striking presence. Their love began in secret, a clandestine affair born of stolen glances, whispered words, and an undeniable mutual attraction. Their affair was a perilous secret constantly threatened by discovery. They met in hidden chambers, in garden arbors, under the cover of night, their hearts heavy with the knowledge of their betrayal of King Arthur, Lancelot's liege, and Guinevere's husband. Their love was intense, consuming, and deeply passionate, yet fraught with guilt and fear. Courtly romance ideal of loving a lady from afar was subverted here, as their love was consummated, making it a dangerous and transgressive act. Despite their efforts to keep it hidden, whispers began to spread throughout Camelot. Sir Agravain, a jealous and resentful knight, and his brother, Sir Mordred, Arthur's illegitimate son, and bring down Lancelot. They gathered a group of knights and plotted to catch Lancelot and Guinevere in the act. One night Lancelot was trapped in Guinevere's chamber by Agravain and his co-conspirators. Lancelot, unarmed at first, fought his way out, slaying 12 of the attacking knights, including Agravain himself. He escaped, but the affair was now undeniably exposed. Guinevere was captured, and, according to the laws of the land, was condemned to be burned at the stake for treason and adultery. Lancelot, upon hearing of Guinevere's imminent execution, rallied his kinsmen and rode to her rescue. He arrived just as the flames were being prepared. In a desperate and bloody battle, Lancelot freed Guinevere. But in the chaos, he accidentally killed 2 innocent and beloved knights of the Round Table, Sir Gareth and Sir Gaheris, brothers of Sir Gawain. This unintended act of violence had devastating consequences. Gawain, once Lancelot's closest friend, was consumed by grief and a burning desire for vengeance. For his slain brothers, he demanded that Arthur wage war against Lancelot. Arthur, torn between his love for Guinevere, his loyalty to Lancelot, and the demand for justice for his slain knights, was forced to act. He declared war on Lancelot and his followers, driving Lancelot and Guinevere to his castle of Joyous Gard, later named Dolorous Gard. The war between Arthur and Lancelot tore the Round Table apart. Many knights were forced to choose sides, and the Fellowship of Camelot shattered. Lancelot, though a formidable warrior, eventually retreated to his lands in France with Guinevere by his side. Arthur, led by Gawain's relentless pursuit, followed them across the Channel, besieging Lancelot's castle. Despite several attempts at reconciliation, Gawain's hatred prevented any lasting peace. While Arthur was fighting Lancelot in France, Sir Mordred, seizing the opportunity, usurped the throne of Camelot, claiming Guinevere as his queen. News of Mordred's treachery forced Arthur to return to England, leading to the devastating Battle of Camelot. In this final tragic battle, Arthur and Mordred fought, and both were mortally wounded, bringing an end to the glory of Camelot. Lancelot, hearing of the ruin he had indirectly caused, returned to England too late. He found Guinevere had repented and entered a convent, living a life of pious seclusion. Lancelot sought her out, hoping for one last farewell, but she refused to let him touch her, urging him to pursue a life of penance for their sins. Heartbroken, Lancelot also entered a monastery, becoming a holy man. Both lived out their remaining days in repentance, separated by choice, their love forever tainted by the destruction it wrought. The story of Lancelot and Guinevere, with its profound themes of loyalty, betrayal, passion, and the downfall of a golden age, was a constant subject of medieval storytelling, a powerful lesson on the destructive power of illicit love and the complex duties of knights. It resonated as a tale of human fallibility and the profound consequences of forbidden desire. Number 1. Tristan and Isolde. Perhaps the most celebrated and tragic love story of the Middle Ages, the tale of Tristan and Isolde captivated audiences across Europe. Recounted by bards and minstrels from castle halls to village squares, its origins are shrouded in ancient Celtic folklore passed down through generations before being committed to various literary forms, most notably by writers like Berulle, Thomas of Britain, and Gottfried von Strasbourg. This was a love born of magic, bound by fate and doomed by circumstances. Tristan was a valiant knight, nephew to King Mark of Cornwall. He was brave, skilled in arms, and renowned for his prowess. His uncle, King Mark, was fond of him and intended him to be his heir. The story truly begins when Tristan was sent to Ireland to fetch Isolde, a fair princess, to be King Mark's bride. This journey was itself a perilous one, as Tristan had previously slain Isolde's uncle, the formidable Morholt, in single combat to free Cornwall from Irish tribute, creating a lasting enmity between the two lands. Yet a peace treaty was proposed, sealed by Isolde's marriage to King Mark. On the voyage back to Cornwall, a pivotal and fateful event occurred. Isolde's wise mother had prepared a potent love potion, intended for Isolde and King Mark to drink on their wedding night. This potion was meant to bind them in an unbreakable lifelong love. However, due to a terrible mistake, Tristan and Isolde accidentally drank the potion themselves, believing it to be a harmless celebratory drink. As the liquid passed their lips, an irreversible enchantment took hold. They fell deeply, hopelessly, and uncontrollably in love, a love that defied all reason, duty, and social bounds. Their love was immediate, overwhelming, and utterly illicit. Isolde was betrothed to King Mark, Tristan's liege and uncle. Yet the potion bound them with an irresistible force. They arrived in Cornwall, and Isolde was married to King Mark, but their hearts belonged to each other. Their affair began conducted in dangerous secrecy. They met in hidden glades in remote corners of the castle, their passion fueled by the magical potion and the sheer impossibility of their situation. Their secret, however, was always on the verge of discovery. Courtiers, especially the jealous and cunning barons of King Mark's court, suspected their illicit relationship. They constantly plotted to expose Tristan and Isolde, setting traps and observing their every move. King Mark, a good-hearted but often gullible man, was constantly swayed by these accusations, then reassured by Tristan's clever deceptions or Isolde's cunning oaths, only to doubt again. One famous incident involved a trial by ordeal. Isolde, accused of adultery, had to swear an oath of innocence. She arranged for Tristan, disguised as a beggar, to carry her from her ship to the shore just before the oath. When she swore that no man had ever been between her legs except her husband King Mark and the beggar who had carried her, her oath was technically true, and the ordeal confirmed her innocence, though she was undeniably guilty. In spirit, despite their ingenuity, the constant threat of exposure, the emotional torment, and the strain of living a lie weighed heavily upon them. Their love was a source of immense joy, but also profound suffering. They were often separated, banished from court, or forced to flee, enduring hardship in the wilderness, yet always drawn back to each other. Eventually, their affair was irrevocably exposed. King Mark, finally convinced of their betrayal, intended to punish them severely. Tristan was condemned to be hanged and Isolde to be burned. But Tristan, with a daring leap from the chapel tower on the way to his execution, escaped. He then rescued Isolde from the stake. They fled into the wild forest, living for a time in a simple hut, sustained only by their love. Their time in the forest was idealized, a period of pure, albeit rough, love free from the constraints of court. Eventually, however, Mark found them asleep, a sword placed between them as a symbolic barrier, and his suspicions once again wavered. He took Isolde's ring and Tristan's sword as signs of his presence, leaving them unharmed. This act of mercy, or perhaps residual doubt, led Tristan to agree to return Isolde to King Mark and leave Cornwall, taking a vow never to see her again. Tristan, banished, journeyed to Brittany. There, he married another Isolde, Isolde of the White Hands, out of loneliness and a desire for some form of domestic peace. However, he could never consummate this marriage, as his heart and soul belonged entirely to the first Isolde. In a later battle, Tristan was wounded by a poisoned spear. The wound would not heal, and only the skill of Queen Isolde of Cornwall, the first Isolde, could save him. He sent a messenger, urging her to come to him. He instructed the messenger to hoist a white sail if Isolde agreed to come, and a black sail if she refused. As the ship approached, Tristan, weak and fading, asked his wife, Isolde of the White Hands, what color the sail was. Out of jealousy and knowing the consequences, she lied, telling him it was black. Upon hearing this, Tristan, believing his true love had abandoned him, lost all will to live. He turned his face to the wall and died of grief. Soon after, the ship arrived, bearing the white sail, and Isolde of Cornwall came ashore, rushing to his side. Finding him dead, her heart broke. She lay down beside him and died of sorrow, her life extinguished by the very love that had consumed her. They were buried together, and legend says that 2 trees, a vine and a rosebush, grew from their graves, intertwining their branches, forever symbolizing their eternal, intertwined love that even death could not part. This tale, a powerful narrative of fate, passion, and overwhelming sorrow, remained a beloved and tragic masterpiece, recited and sung for centuries, shaping the very idea of romantic love in the medieval mind.